Alrighty, good morning folks, this is Jason on the Primal Outdoors channel. Today we have a big project that we're going to be working on the old bus. Today we're going to be doing something that's going to help the bus start even in extreme cold conditions. Now if you're not familiar, this bus has the old 7.3 liter diesel in it, which is a great motor, but they can be a bit grumpy when it comes to cold weather. So we're going to do a modification today that's going to help that a lot. So HLN reached out to the channel and offered to send me a hydronic heater for the bus. Now the purpose of this heater is going to be to warm the coolant during cold temperatures. So basically I'll be able to fire it up and it will circulate the engine coolant through it, heating it up, which will eventually heat up the block, making it easier to start the engine. So I've got everything in these boxes here. I'm going to get everything out and we're going to look at everything and see what we got ahead of us. All right, so it looks like we got some instruction manual here. So this is the hydronic heater. This is actually what's going to heat the bus. So we do need to get that mounted. And here it looks like we have all our accessories. So it looks like they supplied us with some coolant hose. Not sure this is going to be enough for my application, but at least they gave us some. And then in here, it looks like we have our brackets, the exhaust for the heater, fuel line, because we will have to tap into the fuel tank of the bus, and some more instructions there. And then it looks like we've got more fuel line, the fuel pump for the heater, all those pieces. So we'll get all this out, get it sorted, and then we'll get started. So the first question you guys might have is, doesn't this diesel engine have a block heater? And yes, it does have a block heater, and I can use that when I'm here at my shop and I can plug into house power. But when I'm out in public lands and it's dead of winter, I'm not going to have that as an option. So that's where the hydronic heater is going to come in very handy. All right, first thing, let's just see if this thing is even going to start. I would like to move it over onto my pad because I know I'm going to be doing some work underneath, and I'd rather not be on the gravel, but I haven't started this thing in several months, so let's just see what it's going to do here. Woo! Probably need to get a battery tender for the batteries to make sure that they stay up while it's just sitting here at the shop. So one of the harder parts of this project that I was definitely not looking forward to was adding this fuel pickup line. I do want the fuel to come straight from the main tank. So I was thinking I was going to have to drop the fuel tank in order to add this, but I've looked at it. I think there's actually plenty of room under the bus, since this is a rear mounted fuel tank, that I'm going to be able to add it without actually having to drop the tank. You may not be so lucky depending on your application. So another thing I found that I think is really going to help me is it looks like there's already an auxiliary port here. I'm just going to clean all this up, blow it all out, clean it really good, make sure there's no dirt can fall down here, but this looks like it'll just unscrew, and then this will give me an easy way to just go ahead and add that pickup port. Man, that was too easy. Try to keep as much debris from going down inside there as possible. We should be able to add the pickup tube. Now the thing is a pickup tube, you want to make sure that you add the little rubber seal here. And then we can put that down in there in a way that's gonna sit. Try to play with that bend a little bit because I want it to be deep down into the fuel, but at the same time I don't want it to actually run the tank dry, so that way there's always some fuel in the engine for the engine to run. So I am going to play with that a little bit. Okay guys, so I've got this going in here. Now, one thing that you can do is this pipe can be bent to shape to what you need. You do want to be very careful doing that, just because you can kink it, and if you kink it, that's not obviously going to be good. But I've got it in there the way I want. What I am going to do is I'm going to put self-tapping screws down into here so that that way it is fastened in. Now, these screws were not provided in the kit. I had to provide these myself. Okay, that is in. So one last thing to note about having this fuel pickup in here is now I can use this for the hydronic heater, but I'm also going to eventually be putting a diesel heater in the bus, and so I can tap off the same pickup line for that as well. So this is going to be useful for 2 items. All right, so we're working on getting the fuel line connected here. We've got the fuel line that came with the kit, and then you got a little piece here. Now, they do have some of these screw-on type hose clamps, but then they also have some smaller ones for the plastic fuel line that are like a PEX fitting, so you're going to need like a PEX crimper for that, but luckily I did have one. That'll make a good connection. So another thing that comes with the kit is a protective covering, so I'll put that on to protect the plastic hose and make sure that it's not rubbing against anything or up against anything that could be warm that could cause the plastic to melt. All right, so the next step is I'm going to be installing the fuel pump. Now, this is really important that you do this right and you take some consideration in the routing of your fuel line, because if this is not installed right, obviously you're going to have fuel delivery problems and your hydronic pump is not going to work reliably. So what you want to do is you want to look at the pump and you want to identify the direction of flow, which there is an arrow on it that shows which way that is. On this particular pump, another way to kind of notice is your plug for power is also on the same side as the flow going out. So basically on this pump, fuel's coming in here and going out this direction. When you mount this, wherever you mount it, you're going to want to make sure that your fuel line is going down to your fuel tank. You don't really want to have any loops happening, like coming out of your fuel, like coming out of your fuel line and then having like a loop down like this going back in. So for example, something like that, you don't want that. You want to make sure that your fuel is coming down. If you have a loop like this, you'll get bubbles trapped in there and they'll cause fuel delivery problems. So that's really important in the consideration. Another important consideration is they say you don't want this more than 1 meter away from your fuel supply and no further than 9 meters away between the output and your hydronic heater. All right, folks, so I just want to show you guys how everything turned out. So we have the fuel line coming out of our pickup line. It's going straight up into the pump. I do have the pump at an angle. And then I have the line that's going to feed to the hydronic heater going out this way. And at the same time, I've ran the power wire that was supplied with the pump, and it is plugged into the pump. So I'm going to run this all back to where I'm going to install the hydronic heater. Well, all right, folks, so I feel like I've been given all the cheat codes for this installation. So not only was setting up the fuel system really super easy, but being that this was a shuttle bus, it used to have rear heat. Well, that has been decommissioned by the previous owner, but the lines are actually still under the bus, and I've checked, there's 2 valves and there is radiator fluid at those 2 valves, and they've just been shut off. So I'll be able to utilize the pigtail that came with the system and be able to plumb right into those 2 valves to be able to make my connections to the coolant system of the bus. And that's going to be really easy. All right, so one challenge I am going to have is this is the bracket that comes with the hydronic heater. And these 3 holes here is where it's going to bolt into the hydronic heater. And then you have these so that you can mount it somewhere. Now, I want to mount it to the side of the rail here, but as you can see, it's a little bit tall. So I'll be able to get 2 in the top, but or in the bottom, but I won't be able to get any in the top of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bend these over so that way they rest on top of the frame rail, and then I can screw down and screw into the side, and that should work. A little bit more. I just have to do some spray painting, clean that up a little bit, but that should work nicely now. It should sit right on top of the frame rail. We'll get 2 bolts in there, still get the mount onto the unit. So yep, I think this will work good. Well, we got our bracket all bent. I painted it to fix where I messed up the paint a little bit. We're gonna go ahead and install this on the heater itself. Like I said, it's just gonna install right on the side, and you can actually install it on either side depending on how you want to mount it. Based on my setup, I'm gonna go ahead and install it on this side. So I'll go ahead and get that all installed, and then we'll actually get it mounted to the vehicle. So one thing I have found kind of strange here, I'm noticing that looking in the holes, is there is no threads. So I guess these will self-tap as they go in. All right, so we do got the hydronic heater all mounted to the frame rail. This was probably the most difficult part of the whole progress, was drilling the holes and then bolting this thing up. But now that I have this in, the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and get the radiator lines plumbed in. Okay, there's that. And then fuel pump plugs into here. Okay. All right, folks, so we're getting down to the last little bit of this installation. I've got my radiator lines hooked in, and I've got my fuel line hooked in. I've also plugged in the wiring harness into the top of the unit. Now, since this bus is not built out on the interior yet, I still have much to do there. I just want to temporarily get these wires hooked up. The last few things I need to do is I've got this harness here, which is going to go to the controller, and then this is your positive negative that needs to go to your whatever power source you're planning on using. In my case, I'm just going to hook it to my house power system that I do have in the bus. So I'm going to extend this and then temporarily run it up into the bus. All right, guys, well, that is the heater all installed. I've got the radiator lines hooked up, got the intake, the exhaust. It's a little short. I might order a longer exhaust online so that I can route it completely up from underneath the vehicle. But for right now, for testing, it will be fine. But yeah, got all the wiring plugged in, got everything hooked up so that we can temporarily test it inside. So I'm ready to plug the controller in and turn this thing on. All right, guys, so I did take a couple of tries to get the hydronic heater going. It actually was not a fuel problem. The fuel seemed to be working fine. What I did have a problem was getting the coolant to start circulating through, and I had to mess with that a little bit to get it burped out and then finally get it going through. The heater did shut off on me 2 times with the air 30, letting me know that that was the problem. But now I seem to have got that worked out. It seems to be flowing, and the heater is running, and I can tell by putting my hand on the return line of the coolant that it is getting much warmer. So I'm going to let it go here for about 10-15 minutes. Then I'm just going to turn the key on and not start the vehicle. I just want to see that it looks like the coolant has warmed up. Alrighty, good morning, folks. Well, it is actually the next day. I decided to let the bus sit overnight so that way the engine temps would be as cool as they're possibly going to be. It is August, so it's not frigidly cold, but it is cool enough that I felt necessary to wear a jacket this morning. So I'm just gonna hop in, we'll turn on the key, we'll see what the engine temps are reading on the gauge, and then we'll go and flip on the hydronic heater. I'm gonna give it about 20-30 minutes, and then we'll check it again. All right, so we have no movement from the gauge, so that's a good baseline for us to go off. We'll go ahead and turn on the hydronic heater and give it 20 minutes. All right, so we can see it is now 6:49. That is the correct time I have on the hydronic heater. I'm just gonna go ahead and hit the heat button here. So I'm just gonna hold it down until I see 3 dots there. And then that should actually get the hydronic heater to flip on. So we'll come back to this, say about 7:20. Since we're messing around here, Ben is very concerned that we're going to leave in the bus, so he is making sure that he is right here with me. You want to go bus camping, dude? You want to go bus camping? Also, for those that have been just following along on the adventures I've been doing on my channel and knowing about what's going on in Oregon, as you can see, it is still forest fires going on. Yesterday was actually really nice to install the hydronic heater. The wind had the area cleared out. It was a great day, but this morning it's very smoky. You can tell from the very orange sun and just the haze in the sky. So yeah, I'm glad I got this project done yesterday. I'm ready to get back out in the forest and find somewhere again that doesn't have all this forest fire smoke. All right, so it's 7:18. So the hydronic heater has now been running for roughly about a half an hour. Let's go see if it's made a difference. All right, well, that is really good right there. So that basically is almost up to operating temperature. So I am sure that the van would start much easier on a cold morning. So getting the vehicle up to operating temperature, if this was in a cold morning, like I said, it's August, it's not that cold, but if this was an extreme cold morning like in the winter, that would make a huge difference for getting the old bus fired up. So I'm really excited about this upgrade. I think it's going to be very useful to me in the future. Now, if you have a diesel vehicle and you're interested in adding a hydronic heater so that it can help yours get started up in the wintertime, definitely check out HLN. I'll have all the information down in the description below. Now, for those that are regular followers of my channel, this is just one of many upgrades that I plan to do with the old bus. And if you've been following the channel, you know that I spent some time in Washington. And while I was in Washington, I got to spend some time with Nate with the Dirt Lifestyle channel. And he's building just an amazing 4x4 Aquano line. And it was really fun to spend some time with him and go over all of the modifications and things that he was doing. It definitely put a burr under my saddle to want to start another build, and of course the bus is the most likely candidate. So if you guys would like to see some more build stuff on the old bus, definitely leave a like and a comment down below, and we'll catch you guys again outside.